4 p.m.
The Afternoon Rush.
Your unblushingly frank forum for spirited dialogue and useful information. Real people. Real news. Real radio. The Afternoon Rush.
Exclusive to Radio Al Ansaar.
And yes, it's 7 minutes past 3 p.m. right here on The Afternoon Rush. If you've perhaps just tuned in, great to have you on air with us. And it's that part of the show where we're all really, really excited. I can see Abdurrahman on the technical side has this huge grin on his face because over the past few weeks, we've been inundated with comments and tweets and statuses and letters from people across the world saluting a hero, and that is none other than Dr. Mads Gilbert. And like I mentioned to you a little earlier, and we have been seeing it in the news and speaking about it, he served for 2 weeks at the Al-Shifaa Hospital out in the Gaza Strip. And I was speaking to him a few moments ago, and he's like, no, he's been to Gaza many a time. So it gives us great pleasure to welcome into the airwaves of Radio Al Ansaar this afternoon, Dr. Mads Gilbert. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to South Africa. I'm greatly honored to be speaking to you and to your great people.
Well, we'd like to take this opportunity on the outset to thank you for accepting our invitation to chat to us this afternoon.
It's my privilege and my pleasure, really. So just shoot. Let's get going.
Absolutely. Well, Doc, we'd first like to know, like I was speaking to you a little earlier and asking you, you've been to Gaza over the years many a time. You've had first-hand experience. And like you mentioned, this is the fourth war that you are going through or you've been through out in Gaza whilst you were there assisting the injured. What was the turning point for you over the years? The first time that you decided to actually go into Palestine, to go into Gaza, to assist people? How did you sort of discover that and come to reason with, okay, I'm Dr. Mads Gilbert and I need to be in Gaza to help the people? Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, all of us have a history, and my history is a history of political engagement. Since I was in high school, I was active in the solidarity movement with Vietnam and with the fight against apartheid in South Africa. And I was, like many in the Western world, I believed in the narrative of the brave and heroic Israeli people who was making the desert harvest and bloom and who were attacked by these dirty Arabs. This was the narrative I grew up with. And I actually volunteered to go to serve in a kibbutz during the 1967 war between the Arab countries and Israel. At that time, I didn't know much about Palestine, but somebody told me the other side, the Palestinian narrative. So I changed my mind, and in 1981, I went for my first medical mission to Beirut when the Israelis were bombing Beirut. And then I think the turning point was 1982 when I actually was traveling with a group of medical professionals from Norway on a solidarity mission to West Beirut during the Israeli invasion, siege, and bombing of West Beirut. That was my first encounter with what I could call solidarity medicine, meaning siding up with the oppressed, siding up with the occupied, siding up with those who fight and struggle for freedom, only to do medical work, but to do medical work in support of their just struggle. And since then, since 1982, I have been devoted to doing work in the global south, in areas with medical problems, like in Cambodia and Burma, and most of all in Palestine.
Now, you've witnessed the Israeli invasion back in 2006, 2009, 2012, and now of recent in 2014. How has this time round been different compared to the other 3 years?
Well, I'm sad to say that this last time has been the most brutal of all the attacks I have seen from the Israeli government and the Israeli governmental forces on the Palestinian people. I have never witnessed such a brutality and such a vicious bombing of civilian targets, of the whole civilian infrastructure of Gaza, of children, of hospitals, of women, of ambulances, of mosques. Anything. And, you know, the damage and the destruction of Gaza during these 30 days has been so immense that I think it's calculated that the destruction alone has been more than $6 billion. In addition to that, almost 2,000 people have been killed, almost 10,000 have been injured. And since you asked me what is the difference, I think that the magnitude of killed and injured civilians is very, very upsetting. The UN numbers is that 85% of the Palestinian casualties are civilians. And bear in mind, while almost 2,000 Palestinians have been killed, only 3 civilian Israelis have been killed. That is, of course, 3 too many. But the ratio, the proportion between 2003 is really the proportion between the disproportionate use of brutal military force that the State of Israel has applied in this situation. Also, what differs is the large number of families, Palestinian families, that have been targeted and eradicated. There are 80 families who have had 3 or more family members killed in one attack. And in these 80 families, it's more than half of those killed have been killed in these 80 families. So not only do they target civilian residential areas and schools and UN shelters, they are actually extincting whole Palestinian families without any law and order, without any court order, without any sentence, just that they are Palestinians and that they oppose the occupation and the just struggle of the Palestinian people.
Now, Dr. Gilbert, every single day we've been inundated with pictures, images coming through from social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, of pictures coming through of kids, mothers, fathers, entire families, like you mentioned, being wiped out by the brutal invasion of the Zionist regime. But just speak to us a bit more about a day at Shifaa Hospital. What was it like for you from the time you started to the time you ended, the sort of hours that doctors and medical personnel are working through in these hospitals?
Well, first of all, I was, I think it's nice of you to call me a hero, but I am not the hero. The heroes are the Palestinian doctors, nurses, the volunteers in the hospitals, the ambulance paramedic, not to forget, and the people in the primary health care who so diligently and with such a high moral are serving their people, even as their own families are being targeted. They are losing their own homes to the bombing. Still, they stand tall on their call. They don't yield. They don't give up. They say, we have to serve our people. So make no mistake, I am not a hero. The heroes are in Gaza. They were in Gaza. And as we are speaking, they are still working, long hours, 12 to 24-hour shift to serve the wounded people. So a day in Shifaa would be depending on the rhythm, on the intensity and the extent of the Israeli bombing. So it was actually the Israeli generals who sort of decided the rhythm in Shifaa. We could have some days with lull in the bombing, and there would be quiet hours, and then we would have caseloads of 10, maybe 40, maybe 400 cases coming in a very short time. The night of the Shishaiya bombing, the horrible bombing of the suburb Shishaiya with 60,000 inhabitants, more than 400 patients came to Shifaa during these morning hours from 1 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock in the early morning. And I believe it was 47 of these who were dying or dead. And of course, this is so vicious, it is so dramatic that it's hard to describe. In Shifaa, then, when they enter into the disaster area, the emergency department, the good doctors have to find out who can we save and who can we not save, who can walk and talk and who cannot walk and talk, and to try to find the needle in the haystack, which is the patient who mostly need to get on the operating table as soon as possible to save their life, and who are beyond salvage and who don't need surgery. This is the art of triage or sorting, prioritizing the patients. It's very difficult, and it needs to be done by a good medical boss. And Shifaa has 220 surgeons, Palestinians. They are extremely good, and unfortunately, they are really hard trained in the art of mass casualty and disaster medicine. So then, when we had a caseload, we would sort them, resuscitate, take to the OR those who need surgery, operate them, get them to the ICU, and then maybe there would be a little quiet hours or two where we could refill the supplies. We could prepare new IV lines, new plasters, new tapes, new intubation equipment, clean the blood of the trolleys and the beds, and get ready for a new load. It was endless. It was endless around the clock. And, it was Ramadan, so the Palestinians were fasting from daybreak until sunset. So, they were managing all this without any water or food or anything. Amazing people, incredibly high moral, incredibly dignified, very polite, and with the highest medical standards.
Absolutely, and we can imagine. Now, with regards to the question that's always asked to the Palestinians, in times of these atrocities, what do the people of Palestine need? Their houses are being torn apart. They have nowhere to go, literally. So how do people, international organizations, make a difference in the lives of these people? Lay men and women like ourselves, we collect funds. We try and do a bit of fundraising for them. And we're not sure at times as to what sort of aid is needed for the people of Palestine. If you could kindly enlighten us on that from obviously a medical point of view.
Well, that is a very good and a very important question you're posing. And I think, like, with your history, what was the turning point in your struggle against apartheid. I think what ordinary people around the globe can do is to raise the political awareness and to make solidarity actions. And I think the most important action now is the tool of boycott, sanctions, and divestments against the State of Israel. Just like I remember we were not buying fruit cocktails from South Africa during the time of apartheid. We did not travel. I remember the discussions about Sun City and all these very concrete actions of organizing the peaceful and democratic action of boycotting Israeli goods, divest in the Israeli stocks, and establish political sanctions, trade sanctions, other political sanctions against the State of Israel until they understand that the world does not want a new apartheid system, until the Israeli government understand that they have to find political solutions with the Palestinians. They had a golden opportunity now. There was a new coalition government, like in 2006 after the election. The Israelis literally shoot it down. They don't want to have a Palestinian counterpart for political solutions. So what we can do, you and me, it is not to buy Israeli goods. It's not to travel to Israel as a tourist. It is to side up with the Palestinian and the good Jews and the good Israelis all over the world who say, we don't want to slaughter all Palestinians. We don't want the oppression of the Palestinians. We don't want the racist and apartheid elements in the current Israeli politics towards the Palestinian people. And the most powerful weapon is actually solidarity among ordinary people and actions that force our governments to isolate the government of Israel until they behave.
Now, there's one question I really must ask you, because you have been there on the ground, you've spent time there over the years, and that's the question or the statement that we see a lot in mainstream media with regards to Hamas using ordinary civilians and Palestinians as human shields, as well as sort of using their artillery and their gear, stocking them under the houses and buildings of these Palestinians. How much of that is true? For those of us that have spoken to people in Palestine, we know that so far that is not the truth. But if we could have a statement from yourself, Dr. Gilbert, with regards to that, have you come across of any of that sort with regards to ordinary civilians being used as human shields by Hamas?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I have met thousands and hundreds of families. And, this is part of the war propaganda. I think it was Clausewitz who said that the first victim of war is the truth. What the Israelis and the Israeli propaganda machinery is trying to do is to paint a picture of the Palestinian people as a mixture of very passive people who are being directed by very mean people in this terrorist organization of Hamas. Listen, I don't support Hamas. I don't support Fatah or Palestinian Authority or Jihad or any of the political fractions. I, along with the Solidarity Movement in Norway, we support the Palestinian people and their right to fight oppression and racism. But when you are in Gaza, I think it's only then you can understand that nobody can force ordinary Palestinians to be a passive human shield of any kind, because they are individuals, they are strong, they are thinkers, they are determined people. They are not passive tools for some brutal organization who at gunpoint are forcing them as human shields. That's absolutely a fantasy. It's not true at all. What you see in Gaza now is a broad-based, very largely knit together political united front, which is a popular resistance. I mean, the doctors and the nurses in the hospital, they say that we are part of the resistance against occupation and killing. The driver says that. The ambulance people say that. And they, this picture that they are being forced to be human shields, it's utter nonsense. It's utter nonsense.
Now, Dr. Gilbert, you go on.
And let me just finish that. If the Israeli government and army wanted to fight only man to man, why don't they lift the siege? I mean, where should the civilian people go? They are fenced in and have been so for 7 years. Where should they go? And during this last attack, they shrunk the area where the Palestinians could be by 44%. So they made tiny little Gaza Strip 44% smaller. Now, that is really to take the civilians as hostage when they're bombing. And they say all the time that 90% of their weapons are hitting the intended target, the Israelis. So when they kill, as they have done, they have killed 46 children, extract from that 10%, which is 44, and then you have 420 children being the target of their weapons.
Sure. Also, with regards to your time in Palestine, your time in the Gaza Strip, like we said, you've been there many a time. But if there's one moment that stands out for you, I'm sure there are many. If there's one moment that stands out for you, what would that moment have been?
Well, there are many moments, and I don't know if I have any very specific, but I think that the night of the ceasefire in 2012, in November 2012, after 1 week of intense bombing, 192 killed, a strong resistance, and a very sort of united people saying, we don't want this anymore. We don't want to be cheated. We don't want to be killed and bombed. We're standing strong. And then there was the ceasefire after a fairly short time, which was perceived in Gaza as a huge victory for a united people standing up against both occupation and bombing and colonialism from the Israeli state. That moment, with the jubilant people in the streets and the feeling of enormous relief that the bloodshed was over, that was a very moving moment for me. I was so much longing for that this time, but unfortunately, it has taken so much longer and so much more blood has been spilled. I don't see any other sort of big moments, but there are millions of small moments, in the daily life, in the nightlife, in Shifaa, when we work, when we smile, when we hug, when we say to each other, I love you, when we manage to save a patient, when we manage to do some fantastic surgery, which the Palestinian surgeons do, and save the patient. All these small moments of small victories on behalf of humankind, on behalf of solidarity, these moments is a large mosaic of good feelings, which is the dominant feeling I have, in deep respect to the Palestinian people, in deep respect to my colleagues in Shifaa. These are carrying our dignity on their shoulders, like your people were carrying the world's dignity on your shoulders in your brave fight against apartheid and colonialism.
And finally, Dr. Gilbert, your message to the people of South Africa with regards to the ongoing oppression of our brothers and sisters and children out of Palestine. What would you like to say to them this afternoon?
I would say Gaza and Palestine need you more than ever. Stand up for Palestine. Stand up against the occupation. Organize concrete solidarity actions. try to get your government to be even firmer in their political and diplomatic actions against the state of Israel. Try to enforce boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the state of Israel, and mobilize, because your people have such credibility and such a glorious history in the struggle for the justice for all people. And I think you are, in a way, role models for the world. So the stronger the voice from the South African people, the more inspirational organization we can have, and the more force we can organize, for example, in Europe, in Scandinavia, and in the United States. At the end of the day, it is the people's movement. It is the large united fronts with peaceful means who can pressure the state of Israel to find political solution, which will be the best for both people, because both the Palestinian and the Israeli people deserve to live in peace and security. Nobody should get killed, but then the current politics of the Israeli army and the Israeli government must be stopped. So I really look forward to more and stronger actions from the good people of South Africa.
Well, Dr. Mads Gilbert, a heartfelt thank you to you for representing those of us who cannot physically be there with our brothers, sisters and children out in Palestine. We salute you and applaud you for your wonderful work. And thank you so, so much for joining us on Radio Al Ansaar this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me, and have a wonderful weekend in South Africa. I love you all.
We love you too, Dr. Gilbert. Thank you so much. And that was Dr. Gilbert. He says he's not a hero. It's the people of Gaza that are a hero, but I think he's included in being a hero for the people of Gaza, having treated many of the injured and wounded, and coming to us live from Norway. That was Dr. Mads Gilbert, a wonderful individual. You can only imagine speaking to him is one thing, but like Dr. Basil Abu Arda was mentioning to us, he's just something else to work with. So we hope you enjoyed that interview that we did bring to you today. You're most welcome to check out electronicintifada.net. There are many interviews that he's conducted across the world with many other media houses, should you wish to get a more in-depth view on the current situation out in Palestine. This is the Afternoon Rush. My name is Sabira. I keep you company up until 4 p.m.